Are you looking for a new math curriculum? Well, CTC Math specializes in providing online video tutorials that take a multi-sensory approach to learning. Favorably reviewed in Kathy Duffy's 102 Top Picks and the Old Schoolhouse Crew Review. The lessons are short and concise to help your children break down concepts and appreciate math in a whole new way. The lessons are taught the traditional way, not to the test. Each one of the video tutorials is taught by an internationally acclaimed teacher, Pat Murray, who is renowned for teaching math concepts in a simple, easy-to-understand way and in only a few minutes at a time. Using a multi-sensory approach, having the combination of effective graphics and animation synchronized with the voice of a friendly teacher together with practical assessment, even students who struggled with math are getting fantastic results. And the ones that were doing okay before now are doing brilliantly. Visit CTC Math today and start your free trial. That's ctcmath.com.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions, from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey, everyone, and welcome. This is Felice Gerwitz with an episode of Vintage Homeschool Moms. And today I have a special guest on the line. She is the author of The 4-Hour School Day. And welcome, Durenda Wilson.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here today.
Oh, well, I'm excited because I was able to go through your book. And I have to tell you, we have a lot of things in common, except we never got it down to 4 hours of a school day. But my children always started at 8, and they wanted to be done by noon. And that was a self-imposed deadline. So I always thought that was really funny. And I thought, gosh, we're getting so much done, but maybe we're missing something. So your book, I'm going to call it Required Reading for Homeschoolers, because you have so many nuggets in here that I wish I had known when I started all those many moons ago. And so many good things that I think parents need to hear, even if they've been homeschooling a while. In fact, I told my daughter recently, who has been homeschooling quite some time now. My oldest granddaughter's 15, and she started her in kindergarten, and probably before that. And so she said to me, "Mom, can't you just tell me the highlights?" I'm like, "Well, don't worry, honey. I sticky noted and highlighted for you."
Oh, I totally understand. Moms don't have a lot of time, but at the same time, we also need our cups filled,
Right. Right. And I think that was one of the things I loved, is that you had, some real life incidences with your children. And then also, some things that you were very clear about. So, here we have, a raving fan here as we go on. But I would like you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your homeschool journey. So first start with your, background, a little bit about you and your family.
Okay. Well, I'm married to Daryl, and we will be married 32 years here in a few months. We have 8 kids, ages 16 to 30. We have our 7th grandbaby on the way, and we've been homeschooling for over 25 years. So we have 7 kids graduated so far. Wonderful.
Wonderful, which is always a blessing. I remember my last year of graduation and with my youngest, and he was really cute. He's like, "I feel like I need to get you a present."
Oh, that's so great. Isn't that the truth? It's an accomplishment. The finish line is in sight for us. We have 1 left at home, but I'm glad we're still homeschooling after all these years. It's such a blessing.
Yeah, I ended at 32 years, if you can imagine that. I always tell everybody, yes, I started when I was 18.
Right, right.
I wasn't even
Exactly.
married yet.
Exactly.
I wasn't married at that time. But when I spoke at conferences years ago, I would say I started homeschooling when some of you, I bet, were in middle school in 1986. And first they would be shaking their heads no, and then they were like shaking their heads yes. So, but it has been an amazing journey. So tell me, what led you to homeschooling?
Well, I think that it was interesting because when I was a teenager, I happened to pick up a book by Dr. Raymond Moore called Better Late Than Early. And there were so many things in that book that resonated with my heart for children I didn't even have yet. So it was kind of a seed sown then. And then later, a few years later, I met a homeschooling family for the first time and just really, really enjoyed their kids and was just so just impressed by their character quality, their sense of humor, their quick wit. They were incredibly social. All right. Of these things that we wonder about when it comes to homeschooling, but they were just a great family. And so when my husband and I met and started to talk about getting married and having kids, I mentioned homeschooling to him and he was fully on board. And I was so thankful for that because his brother happened to be homeschooling their children who were just barely school age at the time. So I was thankful for that. He was real supportive about that. And then, when we just kind of talked through some of the reasons we wanted to homeschool, we always just tell people we were selfish. We did not want to share our kids with anybody else, especially not for that many hours a week. Right. And we felt like there were some things we really wanted our kids to have. We wanted, first of all, time with them because we wanted to disciple them. And we know that takes time. And we didn't feel like we could do the kind of job we wanted to by sending them away all day, 5 days a week. And then the other thing is we really wanted our kids to have a childhood. We could really see the value in giving them time and space to play and grow and develop at their own pace. And so what sort of resulted from that was this really kind of beautiful, not perfect, but beautiful combination of directed learning and self-directed learning. And that would probably be the best description of our days. But we didn't like what we were seeing happen in the public school. And we just felt like we could do this. Like God was calling us to do it. And if he was calling us to do it, he was going to give us what we needed to do that. And I tell parents all the time, you have to understand that your role in your child's life can't be underestimated. You have a very, very significant role in their lives. And, God ordained the family. That was his idea. And he ordained parents and he ordained our children, our specific children, to be our children. He brought us together intentionally. And when you really think that through, you realize that if that's the case, then God is going to give us what we need to raise and homeschool them. And so that's kind of how we started out. And, of course, it wasn't a perfect journey. No journey ever is. But I'm telling you, God has been so faithful and so gracious. And we always tell people it is one of the single best decisions we ever made.
That's wonderful. And I think that's another thing, too, that people do not realize. I know a lot of people pay lots of money for private preschools, and I was one of those. And I thought, and here I have a background in elementary ed, learning disabilities is what they called it at that time, and also early childhood education. So if anyone could have taught my kids a preschool environment, at home, it would have been me. But I, even with a degree, was made to feel inferior that, these people, I had a child who was speech delayed, and even the doctor was saying, well, you need to get him around other children. And I'm such a smart aleck. So I came back with, oh, right, because 3 and 4-year-olds can teach him to articulate words better than an adult can.
Right.
He just
exactly.
looked at me like, oh, well, yeah, not, but, but he's the expert and, right. And so you feel, because some people will say in my course of speaking, parents would say, but you have a degree. And I said, and that hindered me in many ways that I can't explain, because I was one of those that tried to recreate the classroom in the home. And that doesn't always work, especially for a struggling learner. So I saw that, though. God is good, like you said. And I really had to pray about it. My husband, who also had an educational background, was not quite on board, but he did give me a 6-month window. He said, let's try it for 6 months. If it doesn't work, we can always put him in school. And we never looked back.
Right. And that's the challenge that I give at the end of the 4-hour school day, is challenging parents after kind of laying things out. I feel like what I did in that book was to take parents by the hand, walk them through just a lot of just sort of broadening their view of what education is. And this book is for people who are thinking about homeschooling, on the fence, or already homeschooling and just feeling overwhelmed. I think that's the big thing, is I really wanted to take the overwhelm out of homeschooling. And so when I get to the end of the book, that's the challenge, is, try it for a year. Just you're not going to ruin your kids in a year, and just consider it an adventure that you're going on together, and see how it goes with these things in mind that I've talked about in the book. And so that's such a great, I love that your husband did that. He said, here, just give it a try, let it be an experiment.
Right. Yes. And we never went back.
I love it.
The other thing too, is one of the how things like you take a medicine and it has these side effects. Well, one of the side effects of homeschooling is that you grow as a family, even through your mistakes. I always admit I'm one of those that's like, it's my fault, I did it. I don't have a problem saying that I messed up. And, my kids have learned some of the things that are good in our backgrounds. They pick up some of the bad habits, but we are such, I have to say, a close-knit family. My kids are friends. My youngest two room together, and they spent the first couple of months explaining that it's okay for siblings to get along. They shared an apartment.
Isn't that funny?
It blew their mind, and they were like,
wow.
We don't get it. And she's like, Mike and I, because at the end, the next one up was 5 years older than the youngest. So he was 3 years older, but he had different interests. So really, Michael and Ann schooled together, and they were like, well, didn't you homeschool? Weren't you like sick of each other? So, she said to me, I spent so much time explaining that, she said finally she didn't even try to explain anymore. She goes, it's okay to like your siblings. It's like,
I couldn't.
So how is I'm sure your kids are close too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, honestly, that's the thing that I've noticed as I wrote the book. When I got to the end of it, I realized, without even intending to, there was such a strong thread of growing a strong, healthy family. And that's really, at the end of the day, that is one of the biggest blessings of homeschooling. And we've found this with our own kids. I spent a lot of time along the way learning conflict resolution so that I could teach it to my children along the way, because I wanted them to not only be friends, but I wanted them to just understand how important relationships are, how important family relationships are. And so I really made a concerted effort to nurture sibling relationships. And that means taking time along the way to nurture those relationships. And they are nurtured by our children working and playing alongside of each other. And, it's easier sometimes to let our kids play with the neighbor kids because they get along better. But really, by prioritizing family time and prioritizing our kids' time together, we really do send a strong message that family is important, and we want to do that. And I look at our kids now, and same thing. We've had a couple who have been roommates. along the way. They, and these are the two that really clashed during their childhood years. And so that was just such a great thing, because what happens is, our kids learn what healthy relationships look like from family life. So they learn what healthy communication is. They learn how to treat other people the way they want to be treated. They learn to be other oriented. They learn teamwork. I mean, the list just goes on of what they can learn starting in childhood with sibling relationships. And our kids love to be together. They love it. We have one in Washington State. So we live in North Carolina. There's 5 of our kids here, one in Washington State, one in Idaho, one in Denver. And I'm telling you, when they get together, it's like no time has passed. And they love to sit around the fire pit and talk about their growing up years and the crazy things they did. And they're just literally like, they're laughing so hard. Tears are running down their faces. And they're just, and that's just a gift for them. It is such a gift. We told them growing up, we said, if you can get along with and learn teamwork and learn how to treat people in your own family first, you can do it anywhere. Like, this is really it's training ground. It's sometimes the hardest place to do it because you feel safe there. And so you tend to not behave yourself as much, and you take each other for granted. And so we were always working on that. Is that how you would treat a friend, or is that how you would want to be treated in that situation? And so just all of that just has ended up affecting our children in so many positive ways. Not only are they best friends, they also know what it looks like when they're working with other people on jobs in their careers. Their employers have commented on their work ethic, their teamwork, the way that they know how to work with other people and bring a positive attitude into the workplace. And all that happened at home. It started at home. Yeah.
And that's the thing, you address some of the issues that parents have and overcome those at the very beginning, which I think is really good, because that is something that we have to remind ourselves when people say, well, you really don't have the background, or you can't possibly teach any grade level. When I started, it was a lot more difficult because the materials were not available, but we're homeschool parents.
Right.
So we figured it out, and we had amazing science labs. I mean, I wrote and spoke about science, but I didn't like getting dirty. So it's okay. We ended up having a doctor come teach dissection. So now you've got an MD, during a camping trip, we had him do some. So we had so many more capable people, in those days when we were trying to figure it all out. And now I feel like parents are overwhelmed. And so they really have to pray and discern. And the other thing I love is how you encouraged parents to look at each child individually.
I was just saying, I think as parents, especially when we're homeschooling, we really want some sort of measuring stick. It is really kind of what we're looking for and hoping for. And I think if we can get away from performance being the measuring stick as much as purpose, I think that changes things. We make purpose our measuring stick. So we're reminding ourselves, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I want to homeschool my kids? Or why did I decide to homeschool my kids? I think having a mission statement is really important. It doesn't have to be long, but something brief and to the point. I know for us, we had about 3 or 4 things that were just sort of our overarching goals, and we could sort of filter our activities and our direction according to those goals. Things like wanting to raise lifelong learners, wanting our kids to be resourceful, have a good work ethic, have a relationship with the Lord. And so those are important things for us. And so I think that having something like that is really, really important.
That's wonderful. And I think that is one of the keys to homeschooling. Of course, you're going to tweak it as the years go on, but that is foundational for our children, for them to understand too what their mission is. Because how can you reach your goal? right?
Right. I always tell parents, be stubborn about your goals, but flexible about your methods. So the mission statement would be about your ultimate goals. And then we're flexible about the methods of how we're going to get there, depending on the child, depending on the season of life we're in, developmentally, where our kids are on that scope as well. And so we can just, but we always have a direction. I think this is important because we can get caught up in the minutia of homeschooling day to day. There's a lot that goes on every day. And we just sometimes need to step back and look at the big picture again and remind ourselves, what are my overarching goals with these kids? And what do I really feel like God has for them and wants for them ultimately? And then be able to sort of align everything back up with that. And it just really helps reduce the anxiety because we're not wondering, we don't feel directionless. And I think that's just so important. We've got to have purpose.
Wonderful. And I think that is so key. I love it. So here's the $1 million question. How can moms gain more time in their day? It is sometimes overwhelming. And at the end of the day, you're like, we didn't do anything. And then at the end of the year, when you're putting together a portfolio, you're like, oh my gosh, we did all this.
Right.
So some days are obviously better than others, but just give us some little tidbits that would help us. And I'm sure you go into more detail in your book.
I do go into more detail, but a couple of things would be simplifying. And one of the ways that I simplified, because I'm a type A personality, if I did a lesson plan, I know people use planners and they love them. And I'm not opposed to that if that's something that works well for you. For me, it didn't work well. So because I'm a type A personality, I would think I've got to do all of those things. Now I had a general plan. Like I knew what the basic things that we were going to cover every morning, but I didn't have page numbers. And then we're going to do this activity and that activity, because what I found was if I was going to follow our kids' interests at all, I needed to leave some margin for that. And then when they did find an interest, which they inevitably did, just day to day, when they're little, they play outside. Maybe they're into worms for a while. Maybe they're into dinosaurs for a while, but you can't predict that. So what I would do is as they found those interests, I would begin, I would encourage it. I would say, hey, maybe what do you think about getting some books at the library or off our shelf about those specific things, and just put them in front of them and say, do you want to look through these? And we would just talk about different ways to pursue that interest. And I would just try to feed that fire and feed that flame. And then I would just document what happened that day or that week. And what I found was as I documented the directed, but also the self-directed, our kids were getting a full education. So I kind of call it sort of like reverse engineering our kids' education. It's a way to leave margin, have direction, but leave some margin for experiences and exploration. And sometimes we end up as homeschoolers, we'll end up with an opportunity we didn't plan on. For instance, our grandson was just in the house doing his chores and doing his little schoolwork thing. And then, the concrete truck shows up to do some work across the street. Well, guess what? He can drop what he's doing and he and his mom can either sit there and look out the window or go, a little closer and observe and watch. And, and I can be pointing out things, or she can be pointing out things to him about, oh, do you see that over there? Do you see how he did that? Right there is just a full experience for our kids, and we can document that. And so it was just a great way for us to be able to, like I said, have some direction, but also freedom and flexibility, which is something that is so wonderful about homeschooling, but sometimes parents forget to enjoy that piece of it because they're fearful or nervous about not doing enough. But the reality is our kids will often show us what they're ready to learn and when they're ready to learn it.
Wonderful. And that, you do talk about going through some of the fundamentals in education with your children. And when I read it to my husband, he said, "I told you to do that," because I didn't always. But like you were talking about, reading, writing, and math. And my oldest, he was so speech delayed that science was his back door to getting him excited about things. So we had a pond, so it was a pond book. And so I played science and he would open up and want to talk about it. And he absolutely loved it. And we still have that pond book. I will not get rid of it without its cover. It's like one of those little, little books you get at the store at any nature center. And because it reminded me that by going through their interests, that is how you're going to get them to read, and how his vocabulary would grow, because scientific words are a little bit more difficult. And,
they are. I love what you called that, the back door. I think that's a really great analogy.
Yeah. So, but I did read him that section there, and because he was just stick to the fundamentals. And I was, he has an education background, although I told him it was PE and that didn't count. So of course, I have 4 athletes in the family, and 2 went to college on scholarship. So it did count for something.
It absolutely did.
Yeah. But yeah, I just love that you fostered that interest, because one of my pet peeves, and my listeners, I know you guys know what I'm going to say, but I will go on and on about giving children time to think. Mm-hmm. I think that is one of the fallacies in any educational program, is that the children are so inundated with work from the minute they get up, even with chores, to the minute they go to sleep. Not that those things aren't important, but there's never any time to think for themselves. And,
right. They need time for reflection. They need time to do things by themselves and to discover things on their own. I think that's one of the most powerful ways that our kids learn how they learn. And this is something else that I talk about in the book, that when we give them that time and space, they have a process and a journey that they need to take to learn how they best take in information and how they best learn. And an example of that would be our son, who just loved to role play. And so from the time he was very young, he would, 3 years old, he loved Thomas the Tank Engine. So he would wear an engineer's suit every single day. And then he did that for a couple of years. And then it switched to a pilot, and he had a flight suit that he wore every single day. And he was just, I mean, after a certain amount of time, years and years of this, I looked at my husband and I said, how in the world is this going to benefit him in the long run? I don't know how this fits together. Well, it turns out eventually he got into cowboys, and, he loved the cowboy boots and the jeans. He never grew out of that. And now he is not on a ranch, although he does visit ranches where he does, ranch hand, farm hand type things, but he works at a Christian camp. He keeps the campground. He does the activities with the kids, and he loves it. But when he was in high school and he needed math was not his thing, but he was taking geometry, and he took the approach when he started the class. He said, he was thinking to himself, how can I approach this? And he told himself, I know what I'll do. I'll just pretend I'm a geographer. So that's what he did. He role played in order to engage in learning geometry. And I just thought, that's so fascinating, how they learn how they learn. They know whether they're better at learning things auditorially or visually, or a combination of those, or hands-on. And, that's the beauty of homeschooling, is being able to lay that kind of foundation for higher learning.
And I think too, you had different age children, and 8 kids is a lot of kids. And, I know that a lot of times books that, cause from my own experience with my daughter, she'll listen to something and say, oh, there's no way I'm even listening to this, because that person had 1 child. And even if you have 1 child, it doesn't mean you shouldn't take this advice as well. But having so many children, you have a different perspective, because someone will say, I I had a different type of learner, but whatever that is, you've got one of those, you know what I mean? Even though we didn't have 30 kids in a classroom.
Right.
So I think that, you know, does give you some authority in this, this book, as well as, you know, all the things that you're out there doing now, because it gives parents, you know, through you, that experience to look at things and, you know, to the fact that you could be creative and to allow a child and nurture their interests with having, you know, many children that you were homeschooling at one time is really a testament to the vision that God gave you. Because it's so much easier to just say, okay, look, we're just going to do book work. You know, bother me if you have a question. I mean, you know, that really is easier. And it really, I see a lot of parents struggling and saying, you know, homeschooling is not working for us because my child's an attention or having attention deficit or whatever, but it's not allowing that child to learn as they best learn. And I did that a little bit. I wish I had done that more, to the extent that you did, because I think that, you know, it's such a wonderful way to homeschool. And it's not, you're not saying just let them do anything they want. You know, this is not because I'm a type A too. So I know I already knew the answer to that question.
Right. Yes. You know, there needs to be order. There needs to be a certain amount of structure. I looked at it like flexibility within a routine or a schedule. Schedule sounds a little more rigid. It wasn't rigid, but it was definitely, there was order. And, you know, I'm the type of person that I can't function in a lot of chaos in my house. So I had time, a pickup time 3 times a day. You know, right before we sat down to schoolwork, right before or after lunch, and right before dinner. And, you know, it literally took us 5 to 10 minutes to do it. And we just did it. We called it like a 10-minute tidy. I needed that as a mom. And I think it's important for moms to understand that you got to do what works for your kids, but you have to also consider what works for you. And I tell people all the time, I say, you know, this homeschooling thing that we did, honestly, the reason that I even ended up doing this was because I said it was either the nut house or simplify and do this way that just felt so much more peaceful. There was such a difference in my peace level and our kids' peace level, doing it this way, that I knew, I was like, okay, this is what we have to do. And every time I would try to, you know, maybe stuff in extra because I was feeling a little insecure, unsure of myself, it wouldn't work. And so I would just say, Lord, what am I, you know, is this enough? I'm obviously I'm trying to do this thing. It's not working. Clearly we're not supposed to do it, but is this going to be enough for these kids? Am I doing enough? Are we doing enough? And he would always remind me of the loaves and the fishes. And he would, you know, when Jesus told the disciples, see all these 5,000 people, because the disciples were saying, you know, they need to eat. Let's let them go eat. And he said, you feed them. And they looked at him, you know, like, what? We can't do that. And they told all the reasons why. And he said, go and gather up what you have. So he was saying, bring me what you have, not what you don't have. Mm-hmm. Bring me what you have. And then he blessed it and he made it more than enough. And that's what I saw God do over and over and over again. And so really at the end of the day, this homeschooling journey it's a faith journey in so many respects, you know? And so I think just understanding that and being able to and willing to walk that out. And it's a testimony to our kids as well.
Wow. That's wonderful. Well, I highly recommend this book, The 4-Hour School Day. And I was telling Durenda behind the scenes before we went live that I don't do a lot of interviews. And yet when I saw this book, I knew I needed to have her on because it is excellent. It really lays out her vision clearly, but it also gives you a vision as a parent. And really, no matter where, I'm done homeschooling, and I still, you know, think this should be required reading, you know, because you can actually help other people, you know, with because I still answer a lot of, I'm still podcasting, but I still answer a lot of questions from people about homeschooling and their journey. So this is great. Just wonderful. So tell us where we can find the book. And also, I will have some notes on the show page that is, I don't even think I told you the name of this podcast today. The topic is the 4-hour school day. So just look for that on vintagehomeschoolmoms.com. And I'll also have all of Durenda's social media accounts. But tell us, where you hang out the most on social media, and then also where we can find this book.
Right. Well, I'm on Facebook, and I'm also, the Facebook page is my author page. It's Durenda Wilson. And then my Instagram is at Durenda Lee Wilson. And I also have a website, durendawilson.com, and a podcast, the Durenda Wilson podcast. I guess I just figured, since my name is so unusual, it was safe to use it across the board.
I hear you. With a name like Felice, I get it. Okay.
Right,
Durenda,
right.
Durenda is, spell it, Durenda.
Durenda.
Very good. Okay.
Yes.
So that way they'll be able to search for that.
That would be great. And thank you so much for having me. I'm honored that you decided to go ahead and do an interview, even though you're not typically doing those. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I just was, really excited to see something that is practical. Years ago, there was something, I think it was called like the 1 4-hour work week or something like that. Of course, I have that book too somewhere.
Right.
We were talking about dejunking. And, he gave some practical aspects about structuring your day. And a lot of it, which you handled in your book as well, was to also look at areas where we, go down the bunny trail. Because like you said, if you look at your house at different times of the day and you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to take us an hour, but you did it in increments that were doable.
Yes.
That's just such great advice right there. And I have also found, just in my years, I've been podcasting for a ridiculous amount of years now, even before I started the network, which we're on our 8th year this year. And 4 years previous to that, I had been podcasting on writing and publishing. So like 12 years now. But when I talk to some of the most successful people, I find that they do it right now. They don't wait. You didn't wait till the end of the day. You picked up right then. And I've found that with, like some people that I might have been interviewing long ago, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's like somebody famous here. And I'll ask them for like whatever. And, before we had, one sheets and all of the exciting stuff we have now, and they would get it to me like within a couple of hours. I had 2 people I really wanted to review my book. And within the end of that business day, my book was short, that my most recent, I got back testimonials from them. And so that is something that I see that you're doing in your, your homeschool journey, and as a parent, is fostering your children to, not have the attitude, why do today what you can do tomorrow? It's no,
right.
Get it done. And I always like to get it done and get it off of my list, or my
right.
sheet.
And I think it's important for our kids. That's why I really emphasize stability through a routine, because kids need to know what to expect.
They do.
They need to know what to expect, and what we expect. So I always say, don't expect what you're not willing to inspect. So I always inspected their chores, because I did it at that moment after they said that they were finished with it, at the end of chore time. I did it right then, because if I waited, 4:00 in the afternoon, if I didn't do it that day and I happened to walk by their room and they were supposed to make their bed at 8:00 in the morning and now it's 4 and I find out they never made it, I can't really instill good habits and work ethic if I'm not staying on top of that and being a little bit structured about some of those things. But it really does pay off, because so much of life and homeschooling is about plodding. It's just about being faithful in the basics. It's not exciting. Sometimes it really, sometimes it gets a little wearisome, but it is so effective to just be faithful in the basics. Wonderful.
I was going to ask you to sum it up, but you did perfectly right there. Well, thank you. I feel like I've made a new friend, and I hope all of you listeners also feel like you want to find out more about Durenda Wilson. And God bless, Durenda.
Thank you.
And take care. Thank you.
You too.
All right, everyone. Well, so enjoyed the session. Hope you did too. Leave me your comments if you would, or write to me. A lot of you love to email me, so go ahead and do that. You guys take care. God bless. The show notes for today's episode will be at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com. Look for the 4-hour school day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.